Is everybody liking Drupal Camp?
Yes.
Is this anyone's first Drupal Camp? A couple people? Definitely Sue. So, like the other Ryan that I was showing you this morning, the Drupal learning curve, this is going to start out really easy, and then I don't know how to make it not hard, so we're going to do some easy stuff, and then we're going to do some like brain melting stuff at the end. So if you lose me at any point, raise your hand or just scream and I will try to explain. But sometimes you get really way too deep into some of this stuff to understand how everybody else will understand it. I don't even know if I'm saying that well, but hopefully I won't lose you too much. Hey look, generic slide. Okay. I work on at least 5 websites that rely really heavily on calendars, and almost every website I've ever built has had some sort of a date component to it. So all the way back to my very, very first commercial website that I built for someone, it was an event registration site, and this guy was organizing tournaments for Magic the Gathering card tournaments, and he wanted to collect $25 per person to come to this event. And so the registration had to open on a certain day, and then he wanted people to be able to pay for stuff. And then a week before, he wanted everyone to get an email about it, and then he wanted to have a spreadsheet of everybody that was there. And now you can just go to Eventbrite and push a couple of buttons, or you can download the COD distribution of Drupal, which is what we used for our Drupal Camp website. It's called COD, Conference Organizing Distribution. This probably should be on a slide somewhere. And that does about 98% of what my original custom-built PHP application was. And that's actually how I ended up getting into Drupal, was I'm sitting there and I'm doing all this stuff, I'm writing all this PHP code, and then they said, oh, can we have a blog too? And I went, oh, okay, well, I've heard WordPress is an okay blog, so I installed WordPress, and they're like, oh, but we want people to be able to leave comments using their same email address. And I said, oh, well, there's probably some way to do single sign-on from some arbitrary e-commerce store that I built to WordPress, so let me figure that out. Oh, can we have a forum? Sure, I think PHPBB is a pretty good forum, so there's probably some way to do single sign-on between WordPress and this proprietary e-commerce website and PHPBB. This isn't hard, except for every time that I updated WordPress, it would like break something, and then I would have to go in and futz with all the PHP stuff. And I wasn't really considering myself a programmer. I just thought that websites were fun. So I started looking around for other stuff, and I played with Mambo, which is now called Joomla, and I played with Drupal, and Drupal was not very pretty. And I don't still think that Drupal is very pretty at all, but it does really cool stuff. And you can't tell me that it doesn't do really cool stuff, and that's why I'm here today. So I got into Drupal because of calendars. And I was looking for something that would let me do the e-commerce and the forum discussions and the blogs all from the same site. And what the heck is it? So without wanting to do stuff with dates and calendars, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So somehow that works out. So when we talk about doing dates and calendars, like I'm really curious actually, what does anybody here have a specific instance, and I can pick on Sue, because I know that you do have a reason why do you want to put date information on your website?
Because we have events.
You have events.
People to come.
So it's a public space.
Public space.
Open to the public. You might want to get it published in the newspaper. You might want to have a fundraiser event, but you also have private events too, right?
Right. We have a summer camp.
Do private events show up on your public calendar that says private event, the atrium is in use, you can't come here?
And meetings, back of house board meetings.
Board meetings.
Deadlines and things that you would want to have your leadership be aware of. So I've had now 2 calendars that I use. Google. And
Yeah.
Publish them.
Cool. Okay, up here.
Yeah, our company, I'm the webmaster for them, the Drupal guy. We have events. Right now, it's basically presented as a page, and I really quite figured out how to use calendar. And something that if you can squeeze it in sometime during the presentation, we'd like to present it as both Eastern Time and Pacific Time. But I don't know how to do that with the way the Drupal sets your local time.
My really fast question for you is, are the people who have to see that, are they signed in to your website when they're looking at it?
No.
That's a problem.
Okay.
It's not impossible, but if they were signed in Drupal core, there is a setting called allow users to set their own time zone.
Right.
And then it just works.
This is just it's basically a brochureware for a company, but we have blogs and events and things that and webinars, and that's mainly our events, is our webinars, and people can see a list of, right now it's just a list of events, and they fall off as the date passes.
Right off the top of my head, because I'm probably not going to be able to answer that question in this,
Right.
but right off the top of my head, my best suggestion is you might have to do some sort of like a locale setting, and then you'd have to have some way of that person specifying their locale, whether it was through some IP address or by them saying something. I don't know. There'd have to
What
be
we ended up
something.
doing is adding a text field that we spell out 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific.
And that's definitely one way to do it.
That just was like,
Yeah.
just get it done, get it off my desk for now.
Sure.
Yeah,
It's
because
an
I ran into
interesting
those
problem
questions.
that for anonymous users. For signed-in users, Drupal knows how to do it.
Yes.
So yeah,
Okay.
interesting question. I
Maybe-
tend to do things that only happen in one time zone, so I've been lucky so far.
Yeah, but I've wanted to be able to present it as a calendar. We work with another, like a trade organization for a product that has a calendar. You can go January, February, March. They have the whole
Right,
month and everything. That's one of the reasons why I'm here.
Cool, awesome. Well, the really basic stuff. Actually, I don't even know if I ended up doing. Anyway. Oops. The really basic stuff, date module and calendar module. You can't do any of the examples I'm going to show you later without these two modules. The site that I'm going to show you, I think I've got 12 on these slides altogether. It uses 11 out of the 12. Like, the client that I have now, they have so many weird, quirky demands with it that we're using just about everything that has something to do with date and calendar. The example I'm going to show you, it's an internal calendar for a company that hosts over 700 public events every year. It's a presenting house, which in Orlando is like the Bob Carr, except for they, at the Bob Carr, only have one venue. At Proctor's, they have their Opera House, they have their Black Box, which is also an IMAX theater. They have the Atrium, they have Rob Alley, they have the Underground Education Space, they have Key Hall, they have a space across town, Capitol Rep, and they have the Closet, and they have the couple of conference rooms and the Guild Hall where you can all have events. So it gets really complicated really fast. But the really, really basic stuff we're going to go over some, and then I'll get to some of the advanced stuff, the Proctor's intranet, and tell you about that. But if you don't have date and calendar, you can't do just about anything. So this would be a good time to just show you a little bit. The really, really, really basics is, what was I going to show you this? Oh, because my computer shut down, of course. Okay. Yeah. No, come on, MySQL, start. It's thinking about it. It's thinking about it really hard. There it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we just go ahead and look at modules really fast, or as fast as my laptop will allow, when you install the date module, it creates a section of modules called date/time. If you haven't seen this interface before, this is something called Module Filter. I really don't ever use Drupal without Module Filter. It makes my life so much easier. And actually, now I hardly even use this because I always use Drush. So if you haven't ever heard of Drush, there might be a session on it today.
It's right now.
It's right now. Go to the Drush session. It seems like everything's being recorded.
It was the last session.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it was between Maps and Brush.
Oh, I
It's
see.
not a fully Drush session either. It's like
Well, it seems like everything's being recorded. I haven't been in a room today without a camera in it, so hopefully you'll be able to watch some of this stuff after the fact. Highly, highly recommend if you use Drupal more than 2 hours a week that you learn Drush. And download the admin menu and the module filter. Can't get enough of those two. So when you install Date, it's going to put a module in your modules folder called Date. And as you can see, a lot of things that I have on this site depend on Date. And there's the Date API and there's Date. So Date API, it does a little bit of stuff. It's a library that if you're into writing code, you're going to use the Date API functions to do stuff in your module. Is anybody here writing custom modules? A couple people. So Date API, they're going to have an API.php file inside of this folder that gives you examples of how to use it. It's worth checking out if you think you're going to have to need it. This is basically just a library. It's adding functions to Drupal that Drupal didn't have already, which a lot of modules do, but this module, they tried to make it so that if you didn't want to use the date field for some reason, you don't have to turn that on if you don't need date field, but you need the date functions. That's what anything that starts with the word API. In views, you have views and views user interface. It's kind of backwards. It should say views API and views, but whatever. That's how they did it here. So Date API is just an API module. Date itself makes a new kind of a field called a date field. And so if I were to turn that on, and then I were to go to like a content type, try to find something that doesn't have a date on it, like a filter, for example. And then you're editing a content type. Now they give you a new field type called date. And the date, the regular widget, I believe, is text field. But date comes with a couple of different of these widgets where text field, it basically is a text box, but it needs you to type in the date in a very, very specific format. Otherwise, it won't like it. And then the select list is going to give you a drop-down box where it says 2012, and then if you hit the drop-down box, it'll show you a few years before, a few years after, and it'll show you April, and give you all the months, and then it'll show you days. And the widget itself isn't smart enough to know that there's only 30 days in this month versus 31 days in the next month. But when you try to save it, then it will try to validate the date, and it'll say, this is not a real date, you can't do that. A lot of these also have a time component to them. There's a couple different ways to do the time, but none of them are incredibly user-friendly. Time is one of those ones you just kind of have to get used to. The pop-up calendar is probably what most people expect. When you click on it, it gives you a little box there. And if your browser supports it, actually you don't even need to do that anymore. Your browser will just say, oh, that's supposed to be a date field? Great, I know what to do with that. So modern browsers actually have date pickers built into them. I think it's probably only like Chrome and Opera and maybe Firefox at this point. There's still kind of like different browsers are catching up. Probably the mobile browsers don't do it yet, but date selection fields is supposed to be built into HTML5 when everybody finishes implementing it. What else do I need to know about this? Oh, if you look, there's actually 3 kinds of date fields: date ISO format, and date Unix timestamp. The only reason why you would want to use one of these other 2 is if you know that you need it. If you don't know what they mean, don't use them. That's the really simple answer. ISO format, it puts the letter T in between the date and the time, and it puts a Z at the end for the time zone, if it's in Zulu time, or it puts plus 0400 or something at the end. It's just this, it's a string. But if you're working with, if everything else in your organization all uses ISO format, then you should store your dates in ISO format so you won't have to do all kinds of weird conversion later. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. And Unix timestamp is actually something that Drupal kind of falls back onto because it has to do with database engines that not every database engine treats dates the same way. MySQL and Postgres have a slightly different way of dealing with it, and MS SQL is a slightly different way of dealing with it, and whatever your database engine of choice is might have a different way of doing that. So Unix timestamp is a way of knowing, well, I'm really just storing a string of numbers, so there's no way that you can screw up storing this. So everything used to be a Unix timestamp, but they're really, really hard to read because it's basically just like a string of 11 numbers, and you're like, is this one bigger or smaller than that one? So the regular date format stores it in something that's just about human readable. It's much, much, much easier. That's what those things do, if you were curious. And so if you were to actually go look at a real date field, let me go make a meeting. Once it's actually been created, this is one. I have this set to be filled in with the current time automatically, but it's set to only do things in 15-minute intervals. So you see it says 2:15, although my computer thinks it's 2:18 right now. It's rounding to the closest 15 minutes. And we have our date set up to be input with a format of year/month/day, time with a PM at the end. All these things are changeable. So if we look at the content type for meeting, also when I click inside of here, it gives me the calendar, right? And then there's a checkbox for all day. If I hit this, the time fields disappear. That's actually a separate module that's called date all day. If you don't turn that module on, this option isn't available. Quite literally, when a date module stores an all-day event, it starts at 000 and it ends at 23:59, and that's how it comes up with an all-day thing. So it's just sort of a trick. It's not really taking away the date information. But yeah, if I were to go make a new meeting, No, I'm in the meeting. I was going to show you the field. Okay. Sorry. Content types for meeting. So, I can't see everything. I'm going to try to make it bigger for you guys. Oh wait, I'm going to make it bigger. A little bit better. Where's my date? Here's my date right here. So this is a date, it uses the pop-up calendar widget. If you go look at the settings for it, most of the date stuff for some reason hides underneath of this little field set, but this is where all the really cool stuff happens. So when you're setting up a date field, you have different ways that you can actually enter the date. And you could say, and this really only has to do with how it's being input. It stores it in a completely different way, and then when it's pulling it out, it can pull it out in a completely different way. This is really only having to deal with the input widget. But if you like to have month first because you're European, or day first, or whatever, you can change things around. You can have stuff in military time or in AM, PM time. When does the Dropbox show you when an event will start and when it will end? You can mess with this stuff if you want to go far, far into the future or far, far into the past. Time increments, like I said, here we have 15-minute time increments because just about everything at Proctor's happens in 15-minute increments. Do you want to allow people to fill in the all-day checkbox or not? Then the really advanced settings is the labels. When it shows you all the boxes, if for some reason you want to have all the boxes have the words next to the box, this is only dealing with the input part of it. Normally you never need to mess with this stuff. The default values. This will burn you. If you have a date field that is not required to be filled in, and then you have it set a default value, when you save the node, it's going to fill it in with the current time. This happens to me every time I go to create an event on Facebook, for example. They have already filled in the time for me. So I'm going along, I'm typing stuff, I'm uploading a picture, and then I hit the save button, and I'm like, oh, I just had the event start at 2:15 on Saturday afternoon. The event doesn't start at 2:15 on Saturday afternoon because they already filled it in. So now I have to go back, I have to edit it, I have to say, no, actually it starts in a week from now at 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, not on Saturday afternoon, to go and, in this particular case, we're having somebody schedule a meeting, so it's okay to have a default date, because it's very likely you might be scheduling a meeting for today, and the worst you're going to do is have it off by a couple of hours. Generally, I recommend, unless you think your use case supports it, you probably want to have this, don't have a default. This is field permission stuff, this doesn't come with it normally. You can have something have a multiple number of dates. There are not a lot of situations where you want to store more than one date on the same thing. Most of the time, you're talking about having one node per instance of a date, right? Yeah.
I thought of an application and I was wondering if this would be good, because I have an arts events listing, which often they'll do, say, a run of shows at a theater, several days, several time slots that are similar but sometimes one-off.
Right.
Would that be good for that, like several instances?
It certainly can be, and I have built sites like that before. The short answer is yes, but if you have the end users filling this stuff in, they just have to understand that if they edit one of them, they all get edited. So if one of them is supposed to say opening night next to it, or if one of them is supposed to say discount for seniors, or whatever it happens to be, then unless you have one event, one node, then it gets a little confusing. But probably yes, probably just fine.
And also, it's really meant for events that don't change over time, like they would repeat but not change in any value.
Yeah. Repeating is by far my least favorite subject in the world, because the way that Drupal handles repeating by default, there's a module called date repeat. You can turn it on. It will let you say, every second Tuesday of the month, I want to do one of these. And the way that it has to do that, there's kind of two ways that it can handle it. One is it makes a new node for every single one, and the other one is it has like a multi-value field, kind of like this. But we've had problems. What I was saying is somebody wants to go in and edit this one and wants to change the time from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and then all of a sudden they've all changed, and they're like, what's wrong? I only wanted to change that one. And so it gets really confusing really fast. I use something that's called clone, node clone, I think it's called. Actually, I could look in the module list and show you, but so basically you make one, you get all the details exactly right, and then you clone it a couple of times, and then they can clone, most of the time you do about 6 or 7 in one shot, and then when you get to the end of that, a couple months later, you come back and you do another 6 or 7, and it works just fine. I like that so much better because they're all completely independent of each other, and there's no question.
Well, that would fix all of the repeating dates showing up on your node when you display.
Exactly.
That's horrible.
It doesn't look very nice. It's confusing.
Yeah. And if you don't show it, it only shows for the first day if you have a repeating date.
Yeah. The repeating dates causes so many problems. I highly recommend node clone to everyone. So yeah, that. And then this is all the stuff that you would normally set up when you're first creating a new date field. Do you want to collect just day information, just hour and minute information, only the year? Do you want to be able to collect an ending date? So does this start at a certain time and end at a certain time? There are all kinds of applications where you really want to collect the start date and the end date as two completely separate and discrete fields, separate from each other. One of the examples is I built a site recently that was an obituary website. And so we had birth date was one date field, and death date was a completely different date field, because it wasn't necessarily measuring their lifespan. long story, but it's there. Time zone handling. Half the time I use sites time zone, half the time I use no time zone handling. In your case, you will have to use something. You can't avoid this question. Repeating dates don't allow. The cache dates thing, blah. Maximum dates per field, blah. This is all caching stuff you don't really need to worry about. So the time zone handling, again, 99 people out of 100 will use sites time zone and they'll never think about it again. But if you have people that are changing their time zone, you just need to make sure everybody knows what they're looking at. That this is time zone adjusted because you're looking at it from your profile and your profile is time zone adjusted. If you were to sign out and you were to look at it, it would show it in a different time zone. So it's trying to be smart for you, but if you have people that are looking at it, sometimes they're not signed in, sometimes they are signed in, and it'll get confusing. That's pretty much everything I can say about the screen. So, what else is on my list of awesomeness? Calendar. We didn't even go to calendar yet. Oh my gosh, we're taking up a lot of time. I'm gonna probably not get to the end of my session. So, calendar. When you install the calendar module, it will let you do this thing here, add view from a template. And the calendar module looks through and finds all the date fields on your site, and it says you could make a calendar based on the created date of the comments. You could make a calendar field based on the received date of the node table. And so the one that I have to find is the date field from the node table because I've got so many date fields on the site at this point. And I click add, and it says, what do you want to call this? I'm going to call this Drupal Camp. And it's already made all this stuff for me. A month, week, day, and year view that all kind of live on the same page. A block that is a little miniature calendar that if I click on the dates of the miniature calendar, normally it will take me to the day view from that date. An iCal feed, this is using a module called the Date iCal module. If you have it installed, it will automatically add iCal feeds to all of your calendars. And then the upcoming block is a list style view that says, these are the next 5 events from today forward. All this stuff is editable, but if all I did was this, and I look at this path, right now it says calendar-node-field, that's not really very fun, is it? So if this is the only setting I changed, /month, right? Okay, so I'd have to go to all of these and change them. So I'm not going to do it. I'm just gonna have to copy this path so I can remember what it is. I didn't do anything, I just hit save. Just thinking about saving. Really hard. I'm just going to go over to that page and I am going to show you what it looks like. And it's going to have a month from the month of April in this case. It's going to default to current date. It's going to show me a bunch of PHP notices. And I have so many things that have a date field on the site, you can't even look at them all. Right? That's during this week. So this is a really, 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 really complicated calendar. Now, half of these things, these are what they call projects on this site. They're things that are ongoing that never actually need to appear on the calendar, but this is with no filters, right? So, but the basic idea is, here's all the stuff that's happening in April. Here's all the stuff that's happening during this week. Here's all the stuff that's happening during the next week, et cetera, right? It comes with this really cool thing they call the pager. I want to go to the next month, I want to go to the previous month. It comes with the ability to switch from a month view to a week view. And so now it will give you a slightly different representation. Same stuff across the top, but along the side it gives you a grid of times. And it tries as best it can to display overlapping stuff again, this is a really, really busy, bad example of a calendar. But one of the things that I love about it is it actually scrolled it down to the first time that an event was going to start, instead of starting it at midnight where there's nothing happening, right? That would be silly. So there's a couple of really smart things in here. There's a day view, so this will take me to, should be the current day, April 20th, right? Today, here's all the stuff that's happening all day, and here's all the stuff that's happening. Apparently starting at 4 a.m. there's something this morning that they were setting up for, I'm assuming this is Schenectady Symphony Orchestra. And all kinds of stuff happening throughout the day. This did not work for proctors, of course, because there's no way you can look at any of these calendars and make any real sense out of it. What is all this stuff? So we have a field on our performances that we call venue, and now we have it a little bit easier to be able to filter stuff, right? So if I go here, calendar grid, to the month view, okay? Here is the real calendar. Still lots of stuff, but a little bit easier to see. You can see at least a week's worth of stuff on one screen. And we have these neat little color codes. This is actually a feature of calendar normally, that if you use taxonomy terms, which we are, we're using taxonomy terms as our venues, then you can say everything that happens in the main stage has the dark blue. Everything that, or actually this is the GE theater, everything that happens in the GE theater is dark blue. Everything that happens in the main stage is purple. Everything that happens in the whatever is gray. Everything that happens in this venue is red, and so on, right? And so I hover over this, and it will actually show me GE theater, and then it also says here, movie. So this is the type of the event is a movie. This program probably also going to say movie. That's a movie. That's a movie. There's something that's not a movie. This is a meeting. It doesn't say meeting after it.
Soldiers playing for.
This is a task. What's that? I think she was making a comment. You okay?
Okay, is there a way we can integrate this with the Google Calendar module? Meaning Google Calendar?
So, in short, yes. There is a module called Feeds. I was just using feeds. Okay, so we go to visits. Oh.
I saw there was an iCal feed, like RSS looking.
That's exactly what we're going to talk about right now. So let's say that you have all the stuff that's already in Google Calendar. People are very happy to be inputting information in a Google Calendar. Everything on this site was entered somewhere else first, and then we just imported it. So you go to the modules you have to have. Let me show you this really fast. Is called the Feeds module. Where is it? Feeds. You got Feeds, Feeds admin user interface, and then you don't really need Feeds paper. But what you do need is you need the, under the date stuff, you need the date API, and then you need this date iCal module. This is a separate module that you got to go to a separate page and download. And once you get it, you also need to get a PHP library. The documentation for it's going to be on the date iCal page, but you got to put that in your libraries folder. So you also need the libraries module. So you'll need feeds, admin user interface, date iCal, and go get the library. It's a PHP library that helps you work with iCal feeds. Once you got all that stuff installed, you go to your structure feeds importers, and basically I'll just add a new one. So I'm going to call this DrupalCamp something. And a new importer will ask you a whole bunch of questions. It says, what is it called? What is it for? Do you want to attach this code to a content type? 99 times out of 100, the answer is no. Periodic import. So how often should it go check for new stuff? This is going to depend on how often you run cron. If you only run cron once a day, and you tell it to check every 30 minutes, it's still only going to check once a day. If you run cron every minute, or every 5 minutes, or every 10 minutes, then the setting starts to get a little more granular, right? Do you want to import it as soon as you tell it that it's got a new feed? Sure, whatever. Then you go to the next settings, fetcher. Do you want to choose a file upload, meaning I want to grab an iCal file, stick it in here as a file, or do I want to give it HTTP, which is what most Google calendars, they'll give you a link that says, this is the iCal subscribe link. You take that iCal subscribe link, you're going to hand it to your Drupal site, and it will do something with it. So the HTTP fetcher, don't really matter about those. The parser, this is where you have to make a change. If you don't have all the stuff set up correctly, it's not going to show you this iCal parser. You have to make sure all the other modules are installed properly. So I'm going to change it to iCal parser. You can actually use this for all kinds of stuff, but the iCal one is relevant here. So iCal parser doesn't have any settings. Processor. Processor, once you know what a feed is, how to fetch it, how to parse it, now you have to decide, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to make nodes out of it? Do I want to make taxonomy terms out of it? Do I want to make users out of it? I'm sure that with other modules you could make any kind of entity you can think of out of the feed items. But in this case we're going to say, I want to make nodes. So I want to make one node for every event on the Google Calendar. When they come in, do I want to update them or replace them? Do I want to process them as HTML or as plain text? Which content type do I want to use? Obviously, if I've got an event content type on my site, I need to already have set that up, make sure it has a date field on it, any other fields that I want to capture, the description, the location, the author, the tags, whatever else is available to me, I want to make sure I have already got those fields set up. So I'm going to set this to event. Who is the author of these? You can make it the admin user, for example. You can make it the anonymous user, something like that. You can make a new user called Google Calendar if you care. Make sure the user has this permission. Do you ever want the nodes to expire? So after a year, just let these things die. Don't leave them in my calendar forever. That's an option, right? So I did change something there, so I'm going to make sure I save it. And then mapping. Without this, nothing happens. So you have to say, from my feed into my node, what's going to happen? So from my feed, I'm going to say date start. Can't do it without this one. I want to go that into the date field, start time. Hit add. From my feed, you have to have at least one unique ID, so unique ID. And over here, they actually give you a special one just for feeds called GUID. This is perfectly acceptable. And then here it's going to say not used as unique. I need to make sure that at least one of these things is unique, because otherwise it will just keep importing the same event over and over and over and over again. It has to have at least one unique field in order to know that I already got this one. I don't need to import it again. So make sure you had at least one unique field. And the very least you got to take the summary and put that to the title, for example. In iCal format, summary is title, description is body, as far as Drupal is concerned. So there's description to body. And there's other stuff, of course, that's available. URL is a really good example. You want to know, I want to go back to the original page where this all started from. So you can do all this kind of stuff. Once you get that all in there, then the feeds module gives you a special URL called whatever the name of your site is /import. And from import, it shows you all the parsers that you've already created. This one is made specifically for stuff coming in from the Proctor's calendar. This one is coming from the Chamber of Commerce's iCal feed. That's the one I just made. So I say, I want to deal with the Chamber iCal importer, and this was last imported 1 hour ago when cron ran, and there have been a total of 336 items imported since we started running this thing. This is the URL. In this case, they actually gave me an RSS feed when they meant to give me an iCal feed, so I put it into Yahoo Pipes and I made it awesome. So that's why Yahoo Pipes, if you've never heard of it and you're dealing with feeds, it's worth looking at. It's really complicated, but it's really, really useful for doing stuff with feeds. It's like, oh, none of these feeds have a location on them, but in fact, they all happen at Mead Botanical Garden. I could put something in Yahoo Pipes and I can say, now I'm changing them all to say, happening at the Orlando Public Library or wherever it happens to be. So Yahoo Pipes is my friend. You hit this button. I can get the button right now. Not gonna hurt anything. And it's gonna go out. It's gonna find that feed. It's gonna find out if there's any new items. It's gonna step through each and every of the entries on the iCal feed, compare it to the nodes that are already in the Drupal system, and find out if there's anything that it needs to update or replace or create. Updated 200 nodes. Done. And then I go to calendar, and they're there on the calendar. Does that help you any? And that's, I don't know what system they use to create some thing. I was going to say something not nice. Something that they have to create their calendar, and they gave me just enough information to be able to do that with it.
So, this is you're importing from Google Calendar to
Yeah.
the website.
Right?
So
It does this in this particular case. It's not from Google Calendar, but it could be. Google Calendar submits iCal feeds just like anybody else.
okay, so it can be both with.
Right, but I don't have a way to push stuff back into Google Calendar from Drupal
Okay.
with any of the modules that I use myself. We could look. I don't know for sure that there is an integration between Google Calendar and Drupal, but there might be. It's theoretically possible. Is anyone doing it? I don't know for sure. But this, if you can do what we talked about today, that's 90% of what you need to do with any Drupal site and calendars. So really fast, I do want to talk about the other ones because we're going to run out of time any second now. Slideshow. We talked about all these. Hey, we got through the first page. Applause for us. The rules module, just get it. It's the best thing ever. The reason why I bring up rules is because of resource conflict. If you do have a situation where you have people booking out different rooms or different spaces or something like that, what the resource conflict will do is it will look at the taxonomy terms associated with it. Like I said, I'm using taxonomy terms for my rooms. Or it could be for, let's say it's a camera that someone needs to check out, or a projector, or an iPad, or whatever it is. Resource conflict will tell you, during this time, this thing is already in use. So that works with rules. The Signup module, probably one of the most indispensable modules if you are working with date stuff. It adds a little form to the bottom of your nodes that have sign up box checked on them, and it says, do you want to sign up for this event? If you say yes, it says, what's your email address? If you're already a logged in user, it knows your email address. You can set it up to send a reminder to say, hey, by the way, if you've ever used groups.drupal.org, which, okay, I'm going to make you all do this. If you do not have a Drupal.org account, you're doing it wrong. And after today, if you don't have a Drupal.org account, we cannot be friends. That's how this works. Sign up is what they use on groups.drupal.org whenever somebody creates a new meetup or a new event, and you say, I want to go, and 24 hours before the event, it reminds you, it says, hey, you said that you wanted to go to this. Here it is. The on steroids version of sign up is called entity registration. The really, really neat thing that this does is it lets you collect other information at the same time that somebody is going through that sign up activity. So we use this on Urban Rethink's website. Well, we're going to start using this on Urban Rethink's website after Coding for a Cause tomorrow. That when somebody signs up for an event, we can ask them, would you like to be a volunteer? They can check yes, and then we can put them onto a list of people that have expressed interest in becoming a volunteer. We can also have this say, in addition to what is your email address, we can say, what is your name? What zip code do you live in? What is your dog's name? Let's say that it's a pet-related event. What's your favorite book? What's the title of your essay? Whatever it happens to be, here it is. The really super awesome add-on to entity registration is called commerce registration. It lets you attach a product to any event on your site, and now when you go to buy this product, you are also registering for this event. So it's a tie-in between other Ryan's Drupal Commerce stuff and entity registration, so that you can pay for registrations to an event. The flag module, just really incredibly indispensable module. The way that I use this is when we have people, they want to make their own. We've got all the events on the entire website. There's thousands of events every year. What about the ones that I care about? I can go by with flag and I can say, add this to my personal calendar, add this to my personal calendar, add this to my personal calendar. Flag can be really, really good for that. Flag is really good in almost every situation. Also, if you're in the situation where, let's say I'm the administrator and I want to put this event on other people's personal calendar, one of the examples they have is a music festival, and there's a guest conductor coming into town. And they want to make a list of the 10 things that they think that this guest conductor needs to know about. We made them a field called guest calendar. And they have to make a user account for this person. But once they do, when that person logs in, we made a special block that says, if you have anything on your guest calendar, show it to them on their user page. And they use the entity reference field so that they can draw a reference between an event and a user. And then we use the views module to pull out anything that has that user's ID on it. If I just lost you, we can talk later. There's something called the full calendar module. This is an alternative user interface for calendar. It's a completely separate project. It's not intended to be used with Drupal, but somebody has tried to make it work with Drupal. We tried it and we decided that it wasn't going to work for us. You might try it and think it's the coolest thing you've ever seen. One of the things that it lets you do is it lets you double click anywhere on the calendar and make a new event. I wrote one line of JavaScript that let me do that with the regular Drupal calendar, so I didn't need this. Fuzzy date, we talked earlier about there. I made a website where you had obituaries. Let's say that I knew my mom was born sometime in 1951, but I don't really know exactly the month or the date right now. So I can fill in the year and say, somewhere in November, somewhere near the end of the month. The fuzzy date will let you do that kind of stuff. Or you can say, sometime in the early 60s. I don't know exactly when. So the fuzzy date module can be good if you have to collect like historical information. Circa 1960, we don't really know exactly when. Sometime around that. The last one that I want to mention is called the migrate module. This is the kind of thing you normally only use when you have to move all of your data from this old legacy website to this new Drupal website. But one of the really neat things is it's got support for the date module built into it. And this site that I've been showing you the whole time, the Proctor's intranet site, what we actually do here is they have this proprietary calendar that drives all of their stuff. It's called Theater Manager. It's a big theater thing. It's cost them, hundreds of dollars per person to use it. But they don't have a web interface. So when somebody bought an iPhone, they said, oh, how do I get to Theater Manager on this? And the guy said, ha ha ha, what are you talking about? Everything you've ever needed is on your laptop. And they go, but no, I want to get it on my phone. So that's why we even built this website, is so that the CEO could get it on his phone. The power of the CEO, I have to say. So all of this stuff, unless it's a meeting, because the meetings are made on Drupal, all of this stuff is actually made in somebody else's database. And once every 10 minutes, we have it suck all of that information out of the other database using the migrate module, and it's all here. And you can actually leave comments on this stuff, and the comments stick, but the comments only live in Drupal. We talked about at one point, like writing stuff back to their database, and then we decided, but nobody really uses that other thing. They're really only using this. So in our case, we didn't need it. But the migrate module, it has a database talk to another database. And their other database is a Postgres database. This is a MySQL database. But has really, really nice date support. And the time zone setting hurt me really badly when I found out. Everything was actually happening 4 hours later, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I said, oh, I checked the time zone setting to be this instead of that. So beware of the time zone setting. What else do I need to talk about migrate? I think that's about it. I wish we had more time. So let me see. What else did we do? Game calendar, iCal feeds, filters. We talked a little bit about filters. I want to show you this. One of the things we did that was kind of neat here is we used the Drupal filters. And I just put some style sheets on this. This is nothing really special, but these are all the venues where something might possibly happen. And so I can say, I only want to see things that happen in the main stage. Then I hit the filter button. Just thinking about it. Needless to say, now I only see things that happen in the main stage. And it has this setting called remember my settings, or whatever it is, so that when I go to the next page, it's going to remember that I was only looking at stuff in the main stage, and when I go to the day view, it's going to remember that I was only looking at stuff in the main stage. Oh yeah, this I think is really fun. Right now, it's got just purple main stage at the top. So I want to see now main stage and Fenimore Gallery and GE Theater. Hit the button. And now they're each in their own separate column. This is all the stuff that happens here. Actually, about 98% of this is actually comes with the calendar module. There's two kinds of displays. When you are doing a calendar, right, it ships with month, week, and day. If you dive into this thing that says format, right here it says calendar type. And these are all just hard-coded in here. Year, month, day, and week, right? And time grouping. Normally you can say no time grouping or time grouping by the hour. So at 7 o'clock, at 8 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock, it'll show you the times down the side. We decided we wanted to have our own because we're crazy. So we have between midnight and 8 o'clock, between 8 and 8:15, 8 and 8:30, 11, okay? Because there was no 15-minute option up here. Probably what I should do is write a patch and send it to Karen. I haven't done it yet because we didn't have time. Overlapping time style. Normally, if you say do not display overlapping items, and then you turn on field grouping by which of the things that you've pulled out. In order for this to work, you have to have pulled out the field that you want to group in the columns by in the top, right? So that's field venue. That's the name of the field that stores the venue information in it. And then you say, do not display overlapping. If you change this, if you say display overlapping, grouping doesn't work anymore. But the overlapping was that thing where they were trying to put all the events, if they happen at the same time, on top of each other. So you kind of get either or. You can't get both at the same time. That, if you ask me, once I discovered that feature was built in, I was like, this is going to save us hours and hours and hours. And then all I did is, like I said, I just put a little CSS up here. It's not really hard.
And this page and all the variations you've done is mostly with the calendar module?
Mostly.
Mostly.
In this particular case, the fact that these have a span to them, I actually had to do a little hack, and like I said, I want to submit this back. I haven't done it yet. That I know that this thing is how many segments tall. So here's a better example. This one is 3 segments tall, right? So I gave this a special property class segments -3 or something like that. Because normally when you do this, the segmented calendar, the columnar calendar, they don't have a span. So I fudged it with style sheets. From this page, that was basically the colors and the spans were the only thing that I really hacked all that much. And then I made it so that they were 15-minute time spans, but then it shows you all the time. So it said 10 a.m., 10 a.m. 15, 10:30 a.m., 10:45 a.m. So I just hit a couple of them. It's just so that it looks pretty. The other way is not bad in any way. Yeah, you guys can totally leave. I'll keep talking forever if you let me. Thank you for coming.
It was good, Brent. Thank you.
Here's a survey. Please come to Coding for a Cause, especially Kristen. Okay, bye.